Welcome to Pencils and Lipstick. This is a podcast for indie authors. I'm Kat Caldwell, novelist, short story writer, and book coach. Here on Pencils and Lipstick, we're obsessed with all things story, and it is my goal to bring you the writing tips that you need to make your novel come to life. Hi everyone, welcome to Pencils and Lipstick. This is episode 297 of the podcast, and it is February 8th as I record this. Today we have an interview. We are going to be speaking with Melanie Anagnos. She is a crime novelist who was born in Paterson, New Jersey, the backdrop of her police procedurals. She has been a waitress, an attorney, and a stay-at-home mom to her two now adult children. And then she went and received her MFA from Sarah Lawrence College, where she was awarded the Gerfine Writing Fellowship. And she currently publishes a Substack called Cherchez la Femme, drawing on media and pop culture from the 1970s. And so we talk about literally all of that. Her experience getting her MFA, why she decided to write crime. She started out writing literary. And then we talk about just how her research led her to start her Substack. So, of course, I will have all those links in the show notes below, along with her books, and I hope that you guys enjoy the interview. Before we get into the interview, I just want to tell you that I came back from a volleyball tournament about 10 minutes ago, literally, in very, very cold Pennsylvania this weekend. And, as one does, I was thinking about our lives, our writing, and watching my daughter and the other girls play volleyball. And it got to the point where they were really neck and neck with this team, very evenly matched. It was a very intense game. And their coach asked them, "Do you guys want this or do you not?" And of course they answered, "Yes, we want it. Of course we want it." She's like, "Fine, then play like you want it and play like you deserve it." And I thought to myself as I was driving, that is the question that I want to ask you guys. Wherever you are in your writing, do you really want this? Do you want to finish that novel? Do you actually? I think it is a valid question to ask for somebody who is maybe not taking it that seriously, or maybe keeps rewriting the same novel. Do you want to finish it? And you know what? It's actually valid to say, no, I don't actually want to finish it. I like just fiddling with it and playing around with it. But if you do want to finish it, then act like you want to finish it and act like you deserve to finish it, that like it deserves to be finished. Do you want to sell your book? Then act like you want to sell it and come to the marketing podcast, which is next week, every third week of the month, and learn how to sell it. Do you want to write another one? Do you want to write another genre? Do you want to? We actually get to choose what we want to do, right? You're not forced to write. And so I just want to ask you, and I think that you should ask yourself, do you want this? Do you actually want to write books? Do you want to sell books? Do you want to be a full-time author? Do you want to be a hobby author? I mean, and there's no right or wrong answer here, right? If you want to just write for your family, if you want to just write because it makes you feel good, but you don't actually care if anyone reads it, that's fine. Again, if you don't really want to finish the novel, if you don't want to write more than one novel, that's fine too. It's okay. You don't have to start a whole new career and have it be writing. You can, write in a Substack if you would prefer. In fact, if you don't know what Substack is, I encourage you to click on the link in the show notes and read Melanie's Substack and just see what the possibilities are. It's basically like Blogger, I would say, from 20 years ago. So what do you want? And whatever you answer, I would ask yourself again, do I really want that? Do I really think that I can act like I want it and act like I deserve it? Whatever that is up to you, right? So that is my question for the week. We are going to go into the interview because the interview is what you're here for. Please remember that next week, Becky and I start right away on the pillars of marketing, and you are going to want to show up to that next next Monday. You will have resources in the show notes, and you can start building your pillars of marketing alongside me. She doesn't throw me under the bus too much, but she probably will start. So definitely show up to that, and then keep listening and get on my newsletter if you want to be part of the marketing live shows, which will happen at the end of March and probably end of May or mid-June. So be on the lookout for that. All the links always are in the show notes below. All right, welcome back, everyone. Today I am with Melanie Anagnos. We are going to talk about a lot of different things, from essay writing to novel writing and all the things in between. So welcome, Michelle, to Pencils and Lipstick. Hi, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure,
Where you're
sure.
located before the snowmageddon comes in?
Yeah. Well, I'm not in the snow zone. So yeah, I'm a novelist, and my debut novel came out this year, last year
Nice.
actually.
Yeah, we switched years already.
We're
Oh
in
my gosh.
January, yeah. And so it was released in June. It's Night Swimming, and it's a crime novel that takes place in the 1970s. It's
Oh,
actually
fun.
a police procedural, and my background is that, MFA program. I never really thought I'd be writing crime,
Really?
and I somehow found my way into writing a police procedural, and it was really a great experience.
Oh, wonderful. There's so many great things. I haven't read it yet, but it is now on my TBR because I just love kind of the police procedural. I'm kind of addicted to them, especially like movies and books and stuff. And one thing I love is that it's set in the 70s. And I think the more that we get into like this technology era, when it's almost easier to set our books backwards because you can use a lot more tropes. So why did you choose to set it in the 70s?
Well, it just really happened. I had been doing a different, I had been, this was a piece that grew out of another novel that I'd been writing, which was a quiet novel, and it took place in the 70s. And the main character, Jamie, was a minor character in that novel. And it just really, as I was writing it, I just thought of, it was so much more fun for me to do this without, the closed circuit cameras and the DNA evidence, and which, I do think, I mean, I read a lot of current fiction, and having that available, it doesn't, it doesn't detract from the mystery. You can,
Mm-mm,
still do a lot
that's
of
true.
really creative things, but this was just a different way of looking at crime, or
Yeah.
looking at how crime, is unspooled, and it was, so it was a lot of fun to do that, to go back to, like, well, your options are pretty limited.
Right, right. And things were different back then. You can play around with a lot of different things, like the different misogyny back then, where the women were, what the difference in, this is set in Brooklyn, right? Is that
In
correct?
Paterson, New Jersey.
In Paterson, New Jersey. I mean, there's lots of different things that were happening, which parallel today, but like it was a different take, so you can really, I don't know. I love the ability to sort of look back on recent history and see, have we come far? Have we moved? Have we changed? What has changed for better, for worse? Like, I just love books set back then. So I don't know. I'm
Well,
really getting into
and I think
it.
it's so true, because this was like, the dawn of second wave feminism. So,
Yeah.
women were being seen in society in a different way, but not completely.
Right.
And so, to your point, what's changed, what hasn't changed, how did that develop? How did the police, one of the things that is interesting to me, and what you would call, I guess, genre fiction, is the tropes. How are a
Yeah.
lot of people always say, well, women are always the victim, and statistically, women are,
Or the
the
victim,
victim.
right?
So,
Yeah.
the question is, like, well, like, how do you deal with that? Do you just, like,
Mm-hmm.
is that just like a plot point, or is it something you explore? Do you look at,
Right.
how are women seen in society? How are the police treating particular crimes? That's something that you can really do and still, follow the format of genre.
Absolutely. And there was no social media back then, but the sensationalism was still there. Like
Oh,
you could still
absolutely.
have those. And the 70s had some crazy crimes happen. Like just very well known crimes against women are like just it's not new, right? Like it's still like there was lots of violence even back then. So is there a reason that you said it in New Jersey?
Well, I'm from New Jersey,
Oh, you're
so
from
that
New
was,
Jersey.
they
Okay.
say write what you know,
Yeah.
and that was something. So I didn't have to create a different environment. But I also felt, and again, like some of this was not intentional, but afterwards, looking at it, I was like, yeah, I really like the way that worked out.
Yeah.
Is that New York and LA? Well, first of all, there's so much fiction that crime fiction that takes place
Right.
there. So and I didn't really want to get into that environment. And I also feel like those are cities that feel very large, very
Mm,
impersonal. They're like intentionally impersonal in a lot of fiction. And in this, I wanted, even though it's a city, to have that, very familiar feel.
okay. Yeah. It does give it a different because readers might not, I mean, some readers do, but maybe the typical reader doesn't think about it much. But your setting is another character, right? Like it has a very big um, goal, I guess I'm trying to say, like in your story. Like there is a reason it will change the story if it's small town, small city, big city, like however people interact with each other and what they can do. So it actually matters, right? Like the story would probably have changed if you had set it in Brooklyn.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like, sometimes, excuse me, you write, and then afterwards, when you step back and look and the things that you like about it, or that are glad that those were the choices that you made, and that was the choice. One, it was familiar to me, so I was writing about it. But afterwards, reflecting, I really did want to have a situation where the city was not overwhelming,
Mm,
that like it wasn't a feel like this is an impersonal
right.
environment.
Right. Yeah. It can. So is it a very dark mystery? Do you feel like how would you describe it?
Well,
Other
some
than
people have called it noir, but I don't really, I don't, it's certainly not a cozy mystery.
yeah.
That I
Okay.
will tell you, it's not a cozy mystery, but I think it's very accessible.
Okay. Very cool. So is this the book that you worked on during your MFA or did you do something else
I
for
had,
that?
so they always say, like, people will write their first book and then it eventually goes in the drawer and then you write the book that gets
Yes.
published. And I had been working on a book that I was, convinced would be the book that got published. And then one day, I just had this inspiration to work on, again, Jamie, the main character, was a minor character in that story. And I started, thinking about, he was a police officer. Well, what would that be like writing a police procedural?
Hmm.
And I don't, the thought, the next thought after I thought, well, why don't I do that, was like, oh, that's such a bad idea. I don't know anything about police procedurals. And but I love doing research. So that
Hmm.
was really exciting for me. And I think the excitement that you have,
Yeah.
to engage with different material and learning new things really infuses, the writing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the reader can see it and feel it, right? Like if you're not super excited about the book you're writing, you should probably write a different one because I
To
think the
write a
reader.
different book. So yeah, so it was not during my, like, I guess certain seeds of it were, developed during the MFA, but yeah, this was a couple of years afterwards.
A couple of years out. Did you enjoy the MFA?
I really did. It was, I think there's MFA programs, like there's, some people think they're great, some people don't. I think, my experience was it was a really close-knit community. I went to Sarah Lawrence. I really enjoyed,
Oh,
my,
nice.
the fellow students, the
Yeah.
instructors were great. It was just a very warm and, like, a place where you just, even if you didn't, get everything you needed to know about craft, I think just being with people who like writing, who talk about writing, who are
Right.
reading interesting things, that in and of itself, was a good experience.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, whether it's MFA or other classes, anything that pushes you a little bit beyond the boundaries that you're going to push yourself, I feel like is good, right? Like I always tell people, writing seems to be in general that one art that people get really comfortable in, and they almost like reject mentors. I'm like, every other art has mentors, they have their coach. For like concert pianists or cellists, they have a coach their entire lifetime, of playing. Like it's good to get there and like write a different, genre, or write or be challenged by it. And whether you can afford it as an MFA or just like the local community college, like your ideas come, right? Like different ideas come than if you're just sitting at home and just sort of like, I don't know, will I write today? I don't know. That's what I always try to encourage people, like get out of your comfort zone. It's good for you.
No, it's funny you say that because that was one of my, when people ask me about writing, genre or writing, crime fiction, and there's that great quote, David Bowie, which he says like, go in the water to where your feet are no longer touching the ground,
Oh, yeah.
and that's where you're going to start creating something interesting. And I didn't know what that would be. I didn't know what was going to push me out of my comfort zone, but I do feel like it's a good, it's a good experience as
Yeah.
a writer.
So did you go into the MFA already being a writer? Were you writing essays
I
before?
did I went into the MFA really I'd never published anything. I liked writing short stories at the time, and I just I wanted to take my writing to a different level, and I didn't really know what the next steps would be. So
Yeah.
I decided to try for my to try working with in the MFA
Right.
program to see like where it would take my writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you get a lot of critiques, I would imagine, like whether it's professors or fellow writers who want to be pushed beyond, right? It's like outside of that, it's difficult to find, your family members won't always tell you what needs to improve in your
And
writing.
and it's also being with other writers and just being like taking it to the next level. But I had even taken a poetry course, and
Oh,
I had never
fun.
like I don't want to write poetry. I have no intention. But just thinking about language in a very different way
Yeah.
was like it was one of my favorite courses that I took there.
Right. So you went in mostly for a short story, but you came out writing police procedurals. I like
Exactly. So
that.
so I think the lesson there is always be open.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Like, was the first book, was that more like a literary, the one that you didn't
It was
publish?
such a quiet novel.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So but I do, even with my police procedural, I write, and that's why I think I like police procedural as opposed to thrillers. Like this is a
Hmm.
crime that could happen in real life. It's very,
Yeah.
there's nobody has the code to the nuclear,
Yeah.
whatever arsenal.
Whatever that thing
And
is,
and
yeah.
it's just, it's not a quiet novel, but
Mm.
it's very, it stays true to what you could read in the paper.
Yeah, and I feel like you can explore a lot. Is it Tanya French, the
Hmm.
Irish? I would think hers are like mystery police procedurals, right? Because they're always. You can explore so much. She explores, like females as a police officer and how they're treated, and how they have to like behave differently, and like even the main character's loss of parents and how that affects them and how they approach the crime. Like they're it's you can have the same concepts, I guess I'm trying to say, as a literary novel with a little bit more umph, page turning umph, I guess. Like you could have.
Right. And a lot of like, stakes very often are just about how much you invest in the characters. I
Mm.
had I'd watched All the President's Men recently, which is the
Oh
Watergate.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
everyone will tell you it's a riveting film. And I was watching it and I had not seen it in years. And I remember, that's the word that came to mind was riveting. And I thought, well, why am I so drawn to this? I know exactly how this film is going to end. Like
Yeah.
everyone who watches that film knows exactly, like how that
Well, of
film
a
is going
certain
to.
generation, yeah.
Well, maybe not, but even when
Right,
when it
right.
was released and Watergate was
Yeah,
fresh in
we all knew.
everyone's
Yeah,
mind, it was
absolutely.
still, a very popular film. And I think it was because, like you're seeing events unfold through the characters' eyes
So
and you're
true.
invested in them. and,
Yes.
their journey. And I think that is as much, a page turner as, like a plot twist can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I would just talked a couple of weeks ago on the podcast about when you're purposely hiding something from the reader, it rarely works well. Like you have to be quite a mature writer to be able to do that well. Because that's not, like you said, that's not the page turning technique. It's actually getting them so involved in looking through the eyes of the character that they're just taking it in from the character's perspective, right? And then when the character's surprised, the reader's like, oh, yeah, I should have seen that coming. Or like they might even say, oh, I saw that coming. But if they actually are, honest, they'll be like, oh, no, that's actually, I didn't actually see it coming, but I felt it, right? I was in it. Like, so you can use a lot of that with genre fiction. That's why I love literary fiction, but my first love is genre fiction. So, oh no, I think you froze. 1 second. Okay, we're back after a very strange power outage for no reason, but that's
For
okay.
absolutely no reason, but yes.
It's well before the snow begetting. We probably won't even get snow. That'll be the funny part. Um, I think we were talking. Honestly, I'm not sure.
Well, I
Editing,
will just
writing.
talk really quickly so that
Yes,
we can
go
we can
ahead.
make sure that this podcast happens.
Yes. So I guess what kind of short stories were you writing? Is that just something that you would do for fun, like throughout your life, or
Yeah,
was it?
I did, it's a structure that is good for, initially writing
Yeah,
because, it has, has a very, very definite structure. And then I just felt like I wanted to do something deeper. And the thing, I do enjoy short stories, but at a certain point, you want to spend a little more time with the character.
yeah, that is true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you
So
trying to publish them, or did you?
I had a few published in literary magazines, but then, I quickly decided that I wanted to do a novel. So I really, that's where I was investing my time.
Yeah, there's only so much time we have, right? Like, there's just
Exactly.
there are some writers out there that can have like multiple projects going on at the same time, but their brains must work differently. Like being able to I have like multiple projects, but I have to like write on one, like I might have to like leave one for a little bit, but I'm not like in one day. I once talked to this woman who would have two screens up and she would work on one and then work on another. And I was like, how do you keep that straight? Like,
Well, it's also a lot of investment in time. When I started my Substack, which is very, very, a lot of research goes into that. And, at that point, I had the outline of my novel, but I was able to balance it. But now, writing my second novel, it really does take a lot of time away so
yeah.
sometimes you need that time away from a novel where you like, you've come to a point where you really just, you want a little bit more perspective, and then it's good to have another project.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. So how do you structure your day? Do you have like certain hours that you work on one or the
Well,
other?
I'm a morning person, so it was much easier when I had an older dog, but now that I have a puppy,
Oh
my time
man.
is not my own anymore. But I do try to write mostly in the morning.
Just the novel or this
The
both?
novel,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. You just feel more fresh.
It's just where I have more of my energy, and it's how I
Yeah.
want to start my day. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's always, yeah, I'm more of a night person. So for years I rejected the idea that I should, but there is something to like the day will eventually interrupt you. And if you've already gotten some work done, you just feel like, okay, at least I got some writing done. And now the day can interrupt me all at once. And if I leave it to like 4 p.m., which sometimes I still have teenage daughters, so sometimes that happens, it's just not the same, is it? It's like, okay, I've done all these things and now my brain's not completely in 1970 in the police procedural. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not all there. Do you get your ideas like in the morning, do you think, or at night? Like, how do you structure your
I
thinking?
get my ideas walking. I get my ideas just, reading different things and thinking like, oh, that would, like that's an interesting story. If I read
Mm,
something in a newspaper and I'll think about, well, what if it happened to this particular character? Or like,
okay.
like what would be like the constraints that would make this even, like more challenging,
Yeah.
for the people involved. So I get ideas in different places.
So are you with the second book? Are you continuing with the same main character, or are you switching main characters?
No, I'm keeping the same main character, but they're, and I think this is something that you see in police procedural, like standalone novels, as opposed to
Hmm.
Harry Potter, where it was a
Yes.
serial. And I do think that they were standalone, but obviously, like they were, joined in terms of
Right.
the narrative
Yeah. Yeah. So
and
there's
continuing, a major story.
right. So for because of it being like standalones, do you is it kind of like you have to restart a little? I mean, I guess you know the main character, but you know how the main character is all it's not just about the mystery he has to solve or she has to solve. It's all about it's a little bit about their life too. So do you have to kind of start from scratch with the other things that are happening around them, or have you kind of already thought ahead on different books of like where he might be in his life?
Yes, I mean, he's progressing in his life, but I think that, all characters have backstory.
Yeah, of course.
So, like the backstory in book two, would be, incorporate book one, but it's backstory. It's not continuation.
Right.
It's just a
But the
little bit of backstory.
Yeah. So you kind of know you were going to write a sequel, like another book when you started?
Not when I wrote the first one, but
Okay.
then I really enjoyed the character, and
Yeah.
it occurred to me that I could write a second one. So
Yeah.
that was the thought, when I was writing the first one. But when I started writing the first one, I didn't even know that I could write the first one.
Right. I mean, I think our first ones were always like, if I could just finish it, that would be great.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And it makes sense. Like then I can go. I'm just always fascinated with series because my series are standalone. And one of the so my third one now is a character that was a side character, but I have realized that whatever I wrote about her in that first book, you can't change it too much in the third book. Like if anyone remembers, so you have to sort of whatever you've written in that first book before I ever thought about this might actually become another, series. I got to stay on that path, So it does add some boundaries, which aren't bad. It's just like it wasn't something I thought of years ago when I wrote the first book. I'm like, oh, okay, now I have to do. I can't just use my imagination anywhere, In this one, I have to stick to it. So, I feel like with the mysteries, eventually you're going to have that Excel file, of like what has happened to him before.
Yeah, you do need that file, because you're thinking, like, like even in the house, like, like was that bedroom down the hall, or like,
Yeah.
because readers will know these things.
Yes. Yes, because they can read it so much faster than we can write it.
Right, and they will remember, and it's important because you do want to have some, credibility, or like you really transporting somebody to a different place, and
Yeah.
I have that place in my head, but getting those details right is important.
It's important and remember like I I don't know if this happened to you with your book, but like sometimes in the editing process things get taken out or added or moved and you don't always really remember months later like it's just very strange. I remember my brain has held all the things that I've written, but they're not all in the book, right? And
Right.
some of them got and I don't think that's something that readers necessarily understand. So half the time I'm like, oh, I gotta go back and reread it, but so you keep an Excel file, like are
It's
you
not an Excel, but it's a sheet. So, like,
okay,
like with the names of the neighbors, or
that's smart.
people's ages, when, things like
Oh, that's
that,
so smart.
that you really just want to be, mindful of, so that you're not, changing someone's name or doing something that, like, well, that couldn't have happened because, it was only, yesterday, the amount of time that's passed.
Right, especially with mystery readers because they're like little detectives themselves.
Yes, yes.
They will. So, are you reading mysteries now? Now that you're writing police procedurals, or do you sort of stay away from reading them while you're writing?
It depends. Like sometimes I'll pick up a book, and then if it feels like really close to what I'm writing, I'll put it down, because I just feel like, I want to write what I want to
Hmm.
write. So I've been
Yeah.
reading, speaking of Harry Potter, the J.K. Rowling mysteries, because those happen in
Oh, I
England. So
haven't
it
read
really
them.
has,
Yeah.
and they're current. So it really has nothing to do with what I'm writing.
Yeah.
And I just love reading and as with watching All the President's Men, I'm so interested in structure as I'm reading.
Yes, yes. And especially somebody who's written so many books. If you like, so my kids, I guess we read the Harry Potter books a couple years ago, but you can really tell her maturity, right? As she's like writing the books and in her writing, which is like that's what we all want, right? So reading books by people who really understand structure and understand story and understand how to like grab you with the character is great. There is a new series, a short series. I love short series because you can actually finish them. I never finish other ones. Called His and Hers, and it's a little raunchy. There are some scenes that get a bit Netflix, and it doesn't add anything to it. So you just fast forward. But the mystery of it, I thought was very well done. I would be interested to know if people who write mysteries or police procedurals thought it. But it was kind of like smaller city, and kind of all the things that can happen even in modern day because there's just not all the bureaucracy, and people sort of know each other, but it's not small town, so they're not in each other's lives. It
Right.
was
It's an
very
interesting
interesting.
balance when you do a small
Yeah.
city and you do a city that's, off the beaten path. So,
Yeah.
people are like, they don't have a preconceived idea about, well, New York. If you said it in New York, people, they've seen it on TV. They know what New York
Right.
looks like. Here, if you're reading about Patterson, you're going to have to think about, well, what does that look like?
Right. So
What is it, what is it like in Patterson in the 1970s? What was that experience?
and how was it to go back to 1970 and remember all the things that there were and weren't? Was it difficult for you, or like, you couldn't? Were there even message machines back then? I think we had
Well,
one in the
that's the
80s.
thing. I mean, I love newspaper.com because when I have that question,
Oh, okay.
I'll look up on newspaper.com or, look it up and say like, well, when do people start using message machines? So,
Yeah.
it did, there was a lot of research. I think the hardest thing for me writing in the 70s was having female characters that were accessible to current readers,
Hmm.
but being honest about the amount of agency that women really had back then.
Interesting. Okay. And how
Because you
did you?
don't, because there wasn't a lot of agency, depending on the woman, depending on her economic status and her
Right.
age. And so you want to be honest about that because
Yeah.
I just feel like I couldn't make a female character who I wanted her to be. But at
Okay.
the same time, you don't want her to have so little agency. One, it just wouldn't be enjoyable for me to write somebody like that. But two, also like, a reader's not going to, like relate to that now. So that was
Yeah.
like a real balance.
Okay. And are you talking like his wife or his coworkers or
There's
who, just in general?
romantic interest, just women who happen to be in the story for a variety of reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you do research on that? Like how?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Like how
Yeah,
would
I
you?
mean, I don't think it was research. It was just really like what I knew of the era and trying to have characters who didn't have a lot of opportunity, who would be, deft enough to pick the opportunities that were available.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It does take a certain did take a certain woman. You think back to it, and then like making sure she's not more of a caricature of what people think women were. Yeah, that is difficult, right? That I did read. I spent a lot of times with my grandparents, so they would tell me stories. They were born in the 20s, and all up the, during that time. And sometimes I read books set back then, and I'm like, that's not true. Women didn't have that ability to choose. You wouldn't be like pregnant out of wedlock and be like, oh well, it's fine. Like that's not really,
Right.
you were really on the edge of society then, and it is frustrating when you read that. So it is important if you're going to set it back then to have like what was actually feasible, not just for women but for minorities, right? And like what the world was like in America at that point.
So yeah, so going back, and I mean, yes, I mean, do I remember, like, what, a TV remote control, your character sitting on the TV couch watching TV, and you have to think, well, was there a remote?
Was there a remote?
People used to have to get up and change the channel.
Yeah, I had to. So I like
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like if you lived in a house with a more modern television, right? So,
Yeah, those were innovations.
and fixing the antenna, because my grandparents would use things until it died, right? So fixing the antenna and like, yeah, and the rotary phones. So I some of that I really really like. Um, I kind of prefer it because these days we have access to so much connection to people. I think like it's getting actually difficult. Um, like you can't miss a phone call. Like it's right there. It's on your watch. It's on your like everything is pinging at you all the time, right? So I want to talk to you a little bit about essay writing because I know quite a few writers. They're doing Substacks, right? They're doing. So what is your Substack about? And is it about writing? Is it just your essays?
It's really just my essays. I
Okay.
had doing research for just for my novel writing. I had come across it had to do with Playboy in the 1970s and just the different the different the way media treated women, and
Yeah.
the way that
Oh,
media
that's
treated the women
interesting.
who
Yeah.
posed in Playboy, and it was really not something that I'd ever read about. So I ended up doing a long form essay, and it was around the time when a lot of magazines were folding and really restricting what they were taking in and what they were printing. And it occurred to me that if I wanted this printed, I would have to do a Substack. And I really just thought, I'd have 5 readers, my family would read it, because I didn't really have a following, but I started doing the Substack and, I started gaining, a small following.
Mm-hmm.
And I started writing other essays, and I really had not really thought that I would be an essayist, but there were things that really interested me. A lot of it was
Yeah.
about the 70s. A lot of it was about the media and different economic
Yeah.
shifts in the 1970s.
Oh, I think that's really fun. Just to like have another outlet for the other things that interest you as a writer. Like and I think Substack is a great place to do that. I'm very impressed that you can get all of that done. Like because essay
Well,
writing
yeah,
is takes time.
it does, and it's a real balance because there are certain times where I have to do a smaller do a smaller post because I just don't have the time to do the research for a Substack.
Sure, sure, sure. But I think it is important to have that information, right? I feel like we're in the day and age of all this information, and yet I feel like we don't have access to like honest information. Like what was it like in the 70s? What was it like in the 20s? What was it, we're now losing everyone who ever grew up in quite a few of these decades going backwards, and we need to know the difference. Like my kids were into Stranger Things. I don't know if your family members were
Yeah,
into that. Yeah, and like my kids were like, "Is that true?" I was like, "Yeah, it is true." Like things were, uh, small things today were a big deal back then. Or like you would just wander the woods, and your parents would never know where you were. Like
absolutely. Nobody could track your phone.
yes,
It's like,
nobody.
like if you ever track an Uber ride, they have that like little
Yes,
car, like exactly what street the person is on.
yes,
Um,
yes. And I
But
feel like we
what
had
I
better
really,
childhoods.
as I said, I love doing research, but I also like when I approach Substack as somebody who, I wasn't going to offer my opinion. I really feel like what I would offer someone is information,
Yeah. Okay.
something about, a topic that they might not have known about before. And, because I really was not looking to be an opinion writer.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I feel like we have enough of this. Honestly, I do like this idea of just like giving information, and I admire you because there are many times that I'll give information and people think it's opinion, and I'm like, that's not. It's just how things are. Like this is how it was. So, and the interesting thing about media, like, do you think it's changed from the 70s, like with your research to now? Do you see a change? I mean, I know we have more like technology or whatever, but the way that the media treats women or treats, do you see any difference or similarities?
I mean, like there are times I'll go on, like as I said, newspaper.com, and I'll come across a headline and think, oh my God, that could be today. Like,
Really?
unrest in the Middle East,
Oh, well, yeah, that's
the same characters, that kind of thing.
yeah,
But,
yeah.
like how women, it depends. Like there were always some writers and some opinion writers who were very respectful. And I mean, there were some pieces written about women that, just the way they were treated or spoken about in major, publications is, jaw-dropping.
Wow. Okay. So newspaper.com. I'm probably gonna go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, that was, for me, it was a wonderful resource just to see what was going on in the world back
Okay.
then.
So do you see just the headlines or do you see
Oh no,
the
you
whole
can get the
article?
whole article. You're reading the
Ah,
paper. You're getting
interesting.
a paper from, 19. I did a Substack piece on 1900 on a murder that happened in 1900,
Oh, wow.
and you can get the newspapers from then.
Oh my gosh. There was a comedian, can't remember his name, who's very well known in the 40s and 50s. So like when television came around and he had his own television show and he did this whole bit where he would only read the headlines and he would say like look how they're trying to sway your emotions. And I remember revisiting that because my grandparents were always like trying to used to like rent the old radio comedy shows and all that stuff. So and I revisited it because I was like that's so nothing's changed in that sense, like the headline is like an emotional grab click, like clickbait has always been around, right? It's just wasn't clicking. It was
Well, it used to be, yeah, when you were online at the newspaper, they would have the Star, the National Enquirer, and they would have these these incredible headlines, like, two-headed, toddler found in the Amazon, like things that like you
yeah,
knew were not true, but you would just pick it up because like what are
like
they talking about?
that's so true. I forgot about that magazine.
Yeah, and it was always at the, like when you're standing there in line, so you're captive because you're waiting for
Right.
your turn at the checkout. So you're of course you're reading these headlines.
That's so true. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, so
That
it was the original clickbait.
Yeah, and the newspaper boys would try to get you to buy their newspaper. So that's so much fun. Oh my goodness. So do you think that you're going to continue with police procedurals for a while, or do you have plans on?
I will for a while. There's a couple of other novels that I think I would love to write, but I really like the character, and I feel
Mm,
like there's a character, like, growth, for him, over the course of a few novels, and there's a
okay,
few different, crimes that I would like to explore,
nice.
just as, because, I just as storytelling, but also, because of some social context. So yeah, there's
Yeah,
definitely a lot that I feel that I could do with the series.
very nice. And you had mentioned before that you didn't, when the idea came to you, your first thought was you didn't know anything about writing a police procedural. So is there any advice you can give people who maybe have the same thought and like how did you go about figuring out the structure of police procedurals, what is needed, what is different from literary fiction writing?
But that's a great question. A couple of things. One, doing research. To reading police procedurals just to see how they're structured. And then there's a lot of really good podcasts now with different police officers who, it's not
Oh,
like true crime. It's more about cases that they were involved in and how did they, what was their investigation like? And even if it's in modern, because most of those, take place now as opposed to the 70s, it just gives you the idea of what was the approach. So,
yeah,
I think there's a lot of really good sources
yeah.
to look at.
Because you have no history in police work at all yourself.
No, I mean, I have a law degree and I know, from having studied law, some of the basics, but
Hmm.
not what you would really need to know as a police officer.
Yeah, yeah, definitely just going at finding the experts, right? Because that is true. This whole time, I hadn't thought about like when they're in the police station, you kind of have to know how they act and what they do and how they investigate and things. Yeah, this is so funny about being a writer. Is you actually have to know things about things that you would never work in, in order to write the story. Like you you feel like you're a police officer now. You're like that's not how I would do it. It's like when my mom watches nursing shows. That's not how that's done.
Well, that was, and that was a fear. That was a pretty high bar because I wanted, people to read it and, police officers to read it and not say, "Oh my God, this could never happen."
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yes.
Like,
I commend you for the research cuz not every writer is like that. I think that will sustain the career better is when you actually get those points right because your readers will follow you because they can trust you. We talked about this on the podcast a few weeks ago as well. So, Where can people find you? What is your Substack called? Can you tell us about that, where to find you there? We're going to have your website, melanieanagnos.com, in the show notes below, and your book is called Night Swimming. I really like that that title, and I do like your book cover. I'm losing words. I don't know why, but I like your book cover. It actually feels very 1970. It feels a bit retro, that book cover.
Well, the photograph is Patterson in the 1970s. And
Oh,
when I found that, that was like, I just knew, and I had to track down the license, and the Patterson Museum, gave me the license to use the photograph. So I am, yeah, very, very grateful because I saw that photograph, and I thought if I can't use it, I will be so distraught because it just,
yeah.
it spoke to me so much.
Yeah, I really like, it tells you, and that's what a book cover is supposed to do, is like tell you right away what it is, right? Even before I see the word mystery on it, I'm like, there's a mystery. That this is a mystery book, right? Because of that. And I love that it's not AI. It's an actual photo. That's wonderful. I think that's so sorry, back to Substack. What is your Substack called so that people
My
can find you
Substack
there?
is called Cherchez la Femme, and that is look for the woman in French, and it's the trope, if there's if something happened, if there's a crime, look for the women because women are always the cause of trouble. So
Oh,
I
really?
yeah, so that is the source of my title.
Awesome. We'll have the link to the show notes, to it in the show notes below as well, because that sounds really great. So I can't wait to have more of your books come out, and for you to come back on the show. But thank you so much for coming today and putting up with little interruptions. But we got through the interview, so that is
Well, thank you
good.
so much for having me and for putting up with my power outage, which seems insurmountable, but you were great. And, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Poor Florida has no idea what's happening, but we'll have you on again soon.
Thank you again.